The monitoring station floated in the empty space between star systems. It had been there for 300 years, watching and waiting. Inside, Commander Zixatheta moved his many tentacles across the control panels. Everything was quiet. Just like every other day for the past 50 years of his assignment. Then the alarm started screaming. Every screen in the station lit up red. The proximity sensors detected something impossible. A ship was coming out of subspace, but not through any known jump point. Zixatheta's 3 eyes widened as he read the data. The vessel was ripping a hole in space itself, forcing its way through, by pure power. The ship that emerged was ugly. That was Zixatheta's first thought. Where coalition vessels were smooth and curved, designed for beauty and efficiency, this thing was all sharp angles and flat surfaces. It looked like someone had welded metal boxes together and called it a spaceship. Weapon ports covered every surface, primitive kinetic weapons that the Coalition had stopped using thousands of years ago. On the bridge of the USS Defiance, Captain John Baker stood with his hands behind his back. He was 45 years old, with gray touching his brown hair and lines around his blue eyes from years of squinting at tactical displays. This was humanity's first journey beyond the solar system, and they had found aliens much sooner than expected. "Captain, I'm reading 17 vessels converging on our position," Lieutenant Amy Ross reported from her tactical station. She was young, only 28, but Baker had personally chosen her for this mission. Her fingers moved across her console with practiced ease. "They're surrounding us in a sphere formation." Baker nodded slowly. "Let them come. We're not here to start a fight." In engineering, Lieutenant Commander Ryan Murphy watched his displays with growing interest. The alien ships were beautiful, he had to admit. Their power signatures were unlike anything in the human database. But beauty didn't win battles, and Murphy had spent his entire career making sure the Defiance could win any battle it faced. The Coalition fleet moved into position with perfect coordination. Each ship was from a different species, but they moved as one unit. The largest vessel, a crystal ship that seemed to glow from within, took the lead position. This was Admiral Kreltok's flagship, the Pride of Seasons. Admiral Kreltok was old, even by his species standards. He had seen 100 conflicts in the war zone, watched dozens of species try to claim this region of space. None had succeeded. The war zone was where the 17 coalition species settled their disputes through controlled combat. No single species could dominate here. It was balanced, civilized, and had worked for millennia. Now this ugly alien ship had appeared in the middle of it without warning. "Open communications," Kreltok ordered. His translator would handle the language barrier. It always did. On the Defiance, the communication system crackled to life. An alien voice translated into English by the ship's computer filled the bridge. "Unknown vessel, you have entered restricted coalition space. This is a designated war zone. You will surrender immediately or be destroyed." Baker looked at his first officer, Lisa Grant. She was 35, with red hair pulled back in a regulation bun and green eyes that missed nothing. "They think we're going to surrender just because?" they asked nicely, she said with a small smile. 17 ships against one, Baker mused. In their place, I'd probably think the same thing. He walked to the communication console. "Open a channel." The bridge crew watched their captain. They had trained for this moment, run thousands of EO simulations. But reality was different. The alien ships were massive, each one twice the size of the Defiance. Their weapons were charging, creating beautiful light patterns along their hulls. Baker spoke clearly and calmly. "This is Captain John. Baker of the Earth vessel Defiance, we're just passing through. We recommend you let us." The translation took a few seconds to process through the coalition systems. When it did, laughter erupted across the alien bridges. The sound came through the communication system, a strange mix of different species expressions of amusement. Zixatheta, still watching from his monitoring station, couldn't believe what he was seeing. A single primitive vessel against the combined coalition fleet? It was suicide. He started recording everything. This would be over in seconds, but it would make an interesting report. Admiral Kreltok stopped laughing first. There was something about the human's voice, a confidence that didn't match the situation. He studied the scan data again. The human ship had no shields, just some kind of electromagnetic field that barely registered on sensors. Their weapons were projectile-based, using magnetic acceleration instead of energy manipulation. Their power source was nuclear fission, not even fusion, let alone antimatter, yet the humans didn't seem afraid. Perhaps they don't understand the situation, Kreltalk's tactical officer suggested. Their technology is so primitive they might not realize how outmatched they are. It was a reasonable theory. Kreltalk decided to give them one more chance. These humans were clearly new to space travel. There was no need to destroy them immediately. The Coalition prided itself on being civilized. "Human vessel," Kreltalk transmitted. "You are surrounded by 17 of the Coalition's finest warships. Your technology is inferior. Your single ship cannot hope to survive. This is not a negotiation. Surrender now and you will be treated fairly." On the Defiance, Ensign Paul White, manning the sensor station, turned to Captain Baker. "Sir, they're charging weapons. Energy buildup on all 17 ships." Baker nodded. "Are our point defense systems online?" "Yes, sir. All railguns loaded and ready. Nuclear missiles armed. The armor is holding at full density." The armor was humanity's secret weapon. For 50 years, Earth scientists had worked with matter compressed from Jupiter's core. The pressure at the gas giant's center had created something that shouldn't exist. Matter so dense that normal energy weapons would barely scratch it. The Defiance's hull was covered in 3 feet of this impossible material. "Sir," Amy Ross spoke up, "should we power up our main gun?" Baker thought for a moment. The main gun was humanity's answer to the question, how much force is too much? The answer had been, there's no such thing. It fired tungsten rods accelerated to near light speed, carrying enough kinetic energy to crack small moons. They had only tested it twice, and both times it had exceeded all expectations. "Not yet," Baker decided. "Let's see what they do first." The Coalition fleet was getting impatient. Admiral Kreltalk had given the humans more chances than protocol demanded. His fellow commanders were starting to question his hesitation. The human ship just sat there, not even trying to run or raise proper shields. "Maybe their translation system is broken," someone suggested. "Or maybe," said another voice, "they're too stupid to understand the danger." The laughter started again, but it was nervous this time. Something felt wrong. The human ship was too calm, too still, like a predator waiting for prey to come closer. "Captain." Baker listened to the alien laughter and made a decision. He turned to his crew, these brave men and women who had volunteered to leave Earth, possibly forever, to see what was out there among the stars. "Well," he said, his voice carrying across the bridge. "We tried to be polite." Admiral Kreltalk made his decision. The humans had been given every opportunity to surrender peacefully. Now they would learn why the Coalition controlled this region of space. He turned to his weapons officer, a creature of living crystal whose body hummed with energy. "Fire a warning shot," Kreltalk ordered. "Low power, just enough to remove their primitive electromagnetic barrier. Maybe when they're exposed to space, they'll reconsider." The weapons officer's body flickered with different colors as it calculated the perfect shot. A small plasma burst, barely enough energy to destroy a small asteroid. For a ship with no real shields, it would strip away their defenses and leave them vulnerable. It was merciful, really. Better than complete destruction. The plasma bolt launched from the Pride of Seasons, a brilliant blue sphere of superheated matter traveling at half the speed of light. Every ship in the Coalition fleet watched. The monitoring stations recorded. This would be a lesson for any other primitive species that might stumble into Coalition space. The plasma hit the Defiance dead center, and nothing happened. The blue energy spread across the human ship's hull like water hitting a wall, dispersing into harmless light. The ugly angular vessel didn't even shake. It just sat there, unchanged and undamaged. In engineering, Ryan Murphy looked at his readings and laughed. He actually laughed out loud, which made his team turn to stare at him. "Sorry," he said, still grinning. "It's just they hit us with a plasma weapon. Plasma! That's like throwing a lit match at a fire truck. The armor made from Jupiter's core matter didn't care about energy weapons. The compressed matter was so dense that plasma just bounced off. It would take something with real mass traveling at incredible speed to even dent it. The aliens had pretty lights, but humanity had built their ship to survive. On the bridge, Captain Baker watched the alien fleet's reaction through the tactical display. He could see their ships moving in confused patterns, probably checking their sensors to understand what had gone wrong. "Amy, give me a target solution," Baker said calmly. "I want to put a shot between their two lead vessels, close enough to scare them, not close enough to hit." Amy Ross worked her console. "Target locked, sir. Quarter power on railgun 3. It'll pass exactly 50 meters between them." Fire. The railgun made no sound in space, but inside the Defiance, the crew felt the vibration through the deck plates. A tungsten rod, no bigger than a telephone pole, accelerated down the magnetic rails until it reached 15% of light speed. Then it left the ship. The rod tore through space like reality. Itself was paper. It didn't just travel through the vacuum. It left a glowing trail of fractured subspace behind it. The very fabric of space-time rippled and cracked in its wake. The rod passed between the two coalition ships exactly as aimed, missing both by 50 meters. But the effects were not missed at all. Every sensor on every coalition ship screamed in electronic terror. The amount of kinetic energy in that single projectile was impossible. The trail it left behind was still glowing, a scar, in space that their scientists couldn't explain. If that rod had hit a ship, it wouldn't have just destroyed it. It would have turned it into expanding gas and memories. Commander Zix Theta at the monitoring station had stopped breathing. His species didn't need to breathe often, but they did need to breathe sometimes, and he had forgotten to do so for the past 30 seconds. The readings couldn't be right. No species put that much energy into a single projectile. It was wasteful, excessive, and completely insane. Admiral Kreltok's tactical officer was doing rapid calculations. "Admiral, if my readings are correct and that was only quarter power, then at full strength such a weapon could crack a planet's crust. It might even destabilize a small moon." "That's impossible," Kreltok said, but his voice shook. "No civilized species would build such a weapon." The communication system came to life again. Captain Baker's voice was still calm, still polite. "That was us being polite. The next shot won't miss." Lisa Grant stood next to her captain. "Do you think they'll back down?" Baker shook his head slightly. "Pride is universal, I think. They've got 17 ships. They think they can overwhelm us with numbers." He was right. The coalition fleet was already moving into attack formation. Each species had its own military traditions, but they all understood basic tactics. Surround the enemy, attack from all sides, overwhelm their defenses. It had worked for thousands of years. Admiral Kreltok gave the order. "All ships, engage at will. Disable their weapons first, then their engines. I want survivors to interrogate." Theor, space around the Defiance lit up like a celebration. Energy beams in every color of the spectrum. Antimatter missiles. Gravity distortion waves, even exotic matter projectiles that existed in 11 dimensions at once. It was beautiful and terrible. The combined military might of 17 advanced civilizations. Paul White at the sensor station was almost bored. "Point defense systems engaging automatically, Captain. Should I even bother reporting individual intercepts?" "Just give me a summary every 30 seconds, Baker replied. The Defiance's point defense was simple and brutal. Small railguns, hundreds of them, each firing tiny tungsten balls at incredible speed. They didn't need to be smart or elegant. They just needed to hit things, and physics did the rest. Antimatter missiles were swatted aside like flies. Energy beams hit the Jupiter core armor and did nothing. The exotic matter weapons were more interesting, but even they couldn't affect matter compressed beyond normal physics. "Sir," Amy Ross reported, "their attacks are actually charging our conversion shields. We're gaining power, not losing it." This was another human innovation. The electromagnetic field the aliens had dismissed as primitive was actually a complex energy conversion system. Any energy that hit it was absorbed, converted, and fed directly into the ship's weapons. The harder the aliens attacked, the stronger the defiance became. Ryan Murphy in engineering was having the time of his life. Reroute that extra power to weapons. Let's give them something to think about. The Coalition fleet was starting to panic. Nothing was working. The human ship was just sitting there, not even maneuvering, and their best weapons were useless. Some of the commanders were already calculating minimum safe distances for retreat. Admiral Kreltok refused to give up. Concentrate all fire on a single point. Maybe we can overwhelm one section of their armor. It was a good strategy against any normal defense. But the Jupiter core armor wasn't normal. It wasn't even abnormal. It was impossible by Coalition standards. Matter compressed so far beyond normal density that their scientists would spend decades just trying to understand how it existed. Captain Baker watched the concentrated fire splash harmlessly against his ship's hull. I think they need another demonstration. Amy, target their smallest ship. Disable only, I don't want casualties yet. Yes, sir. Single rail shot, 10% power, targeting their engine section. The smallest Coalition ship belonged to a species that looked like living water. Their vessel was beautiful, all flowing, curves and translucent walls. It was also about to learn why humans built ugly ships. The tungsten rod hit exactly where aimed. It punched through the ship's shields like they were made of hope and good intentions, through the hull like it was paper, and out the other side, the engine section simply ceased to exist. The ship started tumbling, venting atmosphere and fluids, but the crew sections were intact. Their ship is disabled but stable, Paul White reported. No life signs lost. The Coalition fleet stopped firing. They just stopped all at once, as if someone had thrown a switch. 17 ships, representing the most powerful alliance in the galaxy, had just watched one primitive vessel disable one of their own with contemptuous ease. Captain Baker opened communications again. We're still just trying to pass through. This doesn't have to continue. But pride, as Baker had predicted, was indeed universal. The Coalition fleet regrouped, pulling back to what they thought was a safe distance. Admiral Kreltok called an emergency conference with his fellow commanders. 17 different species, 17 different viewpoints, but they all agreed on one thing. The human ship was impossible. Perhaps we should let them pass, suggested the commander of the water-like species whose ship was now drifting helplessly. They seemed to want only that. And show weakness to every other species watching? Another commander, this one resembling a giant crystal spider, clicked its mandibles in anger. The Coalition has held this war zone for 3,000 years. We cannot let one ship, one primitive ship, make us look like cowards. Admiral Kreltok studied the data again. The human weapons were simple in concept but terrifying in execution. They didn't use exotic physics or dimensional manipulation. They just threw pieces of metal very, very fast. It was so primitive it had gone all the way around to being advanced again. On the Defiance, Captain Baker was having a different conversation with his senior staff. They had gathered in the small conference room just off the bridge. The walls showed the Coalition fleet holding position 5,000 kilometers away. They're not going to let us leave, Lisa Grant said. It's a pride thing now. Then we make them, Amy Ross replied. She was young but had studied every military conflict in human history. Sir, request permission to deploy fighters. Baker considered this. The Defiance carried 24 fighter craft, small one-person ships that the aliens would probably laugh at. They were basically engines with guns designed for atmosphere as much as space. By Coalition standards, they were toys. But Coalition standards didn't account for human pilots. Do it, Baker ordered. But I want our best pilots only. This is a demonstration, not a slaughter. In the fighter bay, the announcement brought cheers from the pilots. They had been waiting for this moment since leaving Earth. Each pilot was the best of the best, chosen from thousands of applicants. They didn't just fly their fighters, they became them. Lieutenant Danny Chen was first in line. At 26, he was young even by pilot standards, but he could make a fighter dance. His craft, which he had named Wasp, was loaded with 2 nuclear missiles. Each missile had a yield of 50 megatons. The coalition used antimatter, which was more efficient, but humans had learned that efficiency didn't matter when you had enough boom. The fighters launched in perfect formation, 24 tiny dots emerging from the Defiance's belly. The coalition fleet's sensors barely registered them at first. They were so small with such primitive engines that they were initially classified as debris. Then they accelerated. Human fighters didn't move like coalition craft. They didn't glide or flow through space. They punched through it, pulling G-forces that would kill most coalition species. The human pilots, protected by compression suits and trained from childhood to handle extreme forces, barely noticed. Commander Zix Theta at the monitoring station was recording everything. His reports would later become required reading at every coalition military academy. He watched the human fighters split into 6 groups of 4, each group heading for a different coalition ship. The coalition fleet opened fire with point defense systems designed to stop missiles and asteroids. The human fighters danced through the fire like it was rain. They rolled, spun, dove, and climbed in patterns that made no sense. There was no grace to it, no beauty, just pure chaotic motion that made them impossible to target. Danny Chen reached his target first, a sleek coalition vessel that looked like it was made of living metal. He armed one of his nuclear missiles and fired it at the ship's shield generator. The missile didn't try to be clever or stealthy. It just flew straight and fast. The coalition ship's captain, a being of pure energy contained in a mechanical shell, couldn't believe the readings. The primitive missile was using nuclear fission, not even fusion. It was technology his species had abandoned before they even reached space. Surely their shields could handle such a primitive weapon. The 50-megaton explosion said otherwise. The blast didn't destroy the ship, but it overloaded every shield generator at once. The electromagnetic pulse, something the coalition had never hardened their systems against because no one used nuclear weapons anymore, fried half their systems. The ship listed to one side, shields down, weapons offline. 23 other fighters delivered similar messages to other ships. Not all used their missiles. Some just strafed critical systems with their guns, projectile weapons that punched through shields weakened by the nuclear blasts. The coalition fleet, 17 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy, was being taken apart by fighters that belonged in a museum. Admiral Kreltok watched his fleet being humiliated and made a decision that would haunt him forever. All ships surrender. Broadcast surrender on all frequencies. The white flag of surrender, or its equivalent in each species' culture, appeared on every coalition ship. It was over. They had lost, but the human fighters didn't stop. They continued. Their attack runs. Missiles already launched, guns already firing. Several more coalition ships took hits before the fighters finally pulled back and returned to the Defiance. Admiral Kreltok was furious. "You continued attacking after we surrendered. That's a war crime." Captain Baker's response was calm and matter-of-fact. "Your surrender was acknowledged and accepted, however. Physics doesn't care about surrender. Weapons already fired will complete their trajectory. Perhaps next time you should surrender before we launch our attack." It was a lesson in human thinking that would spread through the galaxy. Humans didn't stop attacks because you asked them to. They stopped when they were done. Surrender was just a request to not launch new attacks, not a magic word that made existing ones disappear. The coalition fleet was in ruins. Not destroyed, Baker had been careful about that, but definitely defeated. 17 ships, each representing the peak of their species' military technology, had been disabled by one human vessel and its fighters. Vera Jones, the Defiance's communications officer, had been monitoring all frequencies during the battle. She turned to Captain Baker with an expression of amusement. "Sir, we're getting a lot of traffic from the monitoring stations. This battle was observed by approximately 300 different species. And they're all updating their star charts to mark this area as human space now." Baker hadn't intended to claim territory, but it seemed the galaxy had made that decision for them. The war zone that had stood for 3 millennia, where 17 species had maintained a careful balance of power, had just changed ownership in less than 5 minutes. Ryan Murphy called from engineering. Captain, we used less than 2% of our ammunition and 1% of our power reserves. If they had kept fighting, we could have done this about 50 more times. This information, which Murphy had said on an open channel by accident, was heard by every coalition ship. The human vessel hadn't even been trying hard. They had been operating at a fraction of their capability. The real terror began to set in when the coalition scientists started analyzing the battle data. The human fighters had pulled maneuvers that required their pilots to endure 15 to 20 times Earth's gravity. The human weapon velocities suggested an understanding of kinetic energy that treated Einstein's theories as mild suggestions rather than absolute limits. And most terrifying of all, the humans had used nuclear weapons, like they were normal ordnance. Captain Baker opened a channel to the coalition fleet. "We're going to continue on our way now. Please move aside." The coalition ships moved. They moved quickly and without argument, creating a corridor wide enough for the Defiance to pass through comfortably. As the human ship moved forward, its fighters already recovered and rearmed. Every alien sensor tracked it with a mixture of fear and awe. The battle was over, but the legend was just beginning. Within hours, the story would reach every civilized world. The humans were here, and they didn't fight like anyone else. They didn't use exotic technology or clever tactics. They just hit things very hard with very fast metal, and somehow that was more terrifying than any antimatter weapon or dimensional disruptor. The galaxy had fought wars for millions of years, but they had never met a species that treated warfare like the humans did. To humanity, this had been a minor skirmish, barely worth noting. To everyone else, it was the day the old order ended and something new and terrifying began. 3 days after the battle, Ambassador Alan Price stood in the airlock of the Defiance, adjusting his formal suit. He was 52 years old, with silver hair and dark eyes that had seen too many negotiations go wrong. This was supposed to be humanity's first peaceful contact with alien life. Instead, he was here to negotiate terms after humanity had accidentally conquered a war zone. Beside him stood 6 Marines in full combat armor. Each suit weighed half a ton and carried enough firepower to level several city blocks. The Marines thought this was light duty. The aliens would think it was an invasion force. "Remember," Price told the Marines, "we're here to talk. Try not to look too threatening." Sergeant Jake Williams, a mountain of a man even without the armor, replied through his helmet speaker, "Sir, with respect, we're wearing powered armor that could punch through a tank. We're going to look threatening no matter what we do." Price sighed. "Just try not to point your weapons at anyone unless I give the signal." The airlock opened and they stepped onto the coalition flagship. The gravity was lighter than Earth's, making each step feel bouncy. The Marines adjusted instantly, their suits compensating. Price had to be more careful not to accidentally jump with each step. The coalition had sent their best negotiator, a crystalline being named Shimmering Thought of Peace. It stood 3 meters tall and looked like a chandelier had decided to become a diplomat. When it moved, light refracted through its body in patterns that were supposedly beautiful. Price just found them distracting. Ambassador Price, Shimmering Thought of Peace, said through a translator that gave it a tinny electronic voice, "Welcome to the Pride of Seasons. I hope we can resolve this situation peacefully." Price smiled, a gesture that his alien counterpart couldn't read. "That's our hope too. We never intended to claim your war zone. We were literally just passing through." They were led to a conference room where representatives from all 17 coalition species waited. The room was designed to accommodate different environmental needs. One section was filled with water, another with methane gas. A2, third was kept at near absolute zero. Price and his Marines stayed in the section with normal atmosphere, though normal was relative. Admiral Kreltok was there, his tentacles twitching with what Price assumed was nervousness. The Admiral spoke first. "Your ship defeated our combined fleet in minutes. 1 ship. How is this possible?" Price had been briefed on how to handle this question. "Different evolutionary paths, Admiral. Your species developed past warfare through enlightenment and cooperation. Humans developed past warfare by becoming very, very good at it. But your technology is primitive, another representative said. This one looked like a cloud of colored gas with eyes floating in it. You still use nuclear fission, projectile weapons, and armor made of compressed matter. Primitive is a matter of perspective, Price replied. We call it efficient. Why develop antimatter weapons when nuclear ones work fine? Why create exotic shields when good armor does the job? We put our development into making simple things work better, not making complex things that might fail. Sergeant Williams shifted slightly, his armor servos whirring. Every alien in the room flinched. The Marine hadn't meant to be threatening. He was just uncomfortable standing still for so long. But to the aliens, it was a reminder that each human soldier was essentially a walking tank. Shimmering thought of peace tried to bring the discussion back on track. The Warzone has been a neutral combat area for 3,000 years. 17 species use it to settle disputes without full warfare. You've disrupted this balance. Price nodded. We understand that now. But from our perspective, it's just empty space between us and resources we need. We're expanding, and this is the most direct route. You could go around, Admiral Kreltok suggested. We could, Price agreed. But that would add years to our journey. Humans don't like inefficiency. Lieutenant Kelly Brown, Price's tactical advisor, pulled up a star map on her tablet and projected it into the room. If we may, she said, highlighting the war zone. This region is actually perfect for a trade route. It's centrally located, has several stable jump points, and is rich in hydrogen for fuel. Instead of a war zone, it could be a trade hub. The aliens looked at each other. The concept of turning a battlefield into a marketplace was very human. Where others saw conflict, humans saw opportunity. You would need to maintain order. One representative said. The war zone exists because our species have disagreements that can't be resolved through negotiation. Price smiled again. We're very good at maintaining order. Ask your fleet. It was not a threat, just a statement of fact, but every alien in the room understood the implication. Humanity wouldn't patrol the region or police it. They would simply exist there, and their existence would be enough to keep everyone polite. What do you want? Shimmering Thought of Peace asked directly. Free passage for human vessels. No interference with our expansion. In exchange, we won't demonstrate what a real human warship can do. The room went cold, and not just in the section kept at freezing temperatures. The Defiance is a real warship, Admiral Kreltok said slowly. Price shook his head. The Defiance is a scout vessel. It's designed for exploration and first contact. Our actual warships are the Vengeance, Retribution, and Havoc. They're about 3 times the size of the Defiance and carry weapons that make your railguns look like slingshots. This was a lie, but only partially. The other ships were bigger and more heavily armed, but not dramatically so. However, the aliens didn't need to know that. Fear was a better deterrent than actual weapons. Kelly Brown added more information to the projection. We're also planning to build a station here. Nothing military, just a supply depot and trade post. Other species would be welcome to use it. You're colonizing the war zone, an alien accused. We're civilizing it, Price corrected. There's a difference. The negotiations went on for hours. The aliens argued about tradition, balance, and the careful political structures that had kept peace for millennia. Price argued about progress, efficiency, and the human belief that any problem could be solved by applying enough force in the right direction. Finally, Shimmering Thought of Peace asked the question that every alien had been thinking. Why are humans so violent? You're not stronger or faster than most species, your brains aren't larger. Your technology, despite its effectiveness, isn't more advanced, so why are you so good at warfare? Price thought about how to answer this. The truth was complex and rooted in human evolution, psychology, and history. But these aliens needed something simpler. On Earth, he said, we had thousands of years of constant warfare. Every advancement we made was to fight better. We invented mathematics to calculate artillery trajectories. We developed medicine to save wounded soldiers. We created the internet to maintain communications during nuclear war. Every human invention At its root was designed for or improved by warfare. He paused, letting that sink in. Then we reached a point where we were so good at war that actually fighting one would destroy our planet. So we stopped. Not because we became peaceful, but because we became too good at violence to use it on each other. Now we're in space, and we're finding that what you call primitive, we call tested. What you call excessive, we call thorough. The Marines stood perfectly still during this explanation, but their presence reinforced every word. Each human soldier was the product of millions of years of evolution and thousands of years of military tradition. They didn't just fight. They embodied warfare. Admiral Kreltok had one more question. What happens if we refuse your terms? Price didn't hesitate. Then we go through anyway. The only difference is how many of your ships we have to disable first. It wasn't a threat or a boast, it was simply the truth, delivered with the casual confidence of someone who knew exactly how the next battle would go. The humans had already won. This negotiation was just to decide how peacefully that victory would be acknowledged. The coalition representatives looked at each other. They had no real choice, and everyone knew it. The humans were here to stay. 6 months had passed since the Defiance had entered the war zone. The region of space that had been a battlefield for 3,000 years was now unrecognizable. Where coalition forces once fought their ceremonial battles, human cargo ships now moved in steady streams. The USS Vengeance, Retribution, and Havoc had arrived as promised, each one making the Defiance look small by comparison. Captain John Baker stood on the observation deck of Outpost Alpha, humanity's first space station outside the solar system. Through the transparent aluminum windows, he could see dozens of alien ships approaching the trade hub. They came nervously, like deer approaching a waterhole where lions might be resting. Never thought I'd retire as a station administrator, Baker said to Lisa Grant, who stood beside him. She had been promoted to captain and given command of the Defiance. Baker had chosen to stay and oversee the transition of the war zone into what humans were calling the trade corridor. You're not retired, Grant replied with a smile. You're the military governor of humanity's first interstellar territory. We don't call it territory, Baker corrected. That makes the aliens nervous. We call it a free trade zone that we happen to protect. Through the window, they watched a coalition science vessel dock with the station. The aliens had started coming 2 months ago, first in small numbers, then in crowds. They were curious about humans, these impossible beings who treated violence like breathing. Dr. Carl Adams, the station's chief scientist and xenobiologist, had made the discovery that explained everything and terrified everyone. He joined Baker and Grant on the observation deck, carrying a tablet full of data. I've confirmed it, Adams said without preamble. Humans are completely average in every measurable way except one. Which is? Grant asked. We never stopped being violent. Every other species in the galaxy went through a period of warfare, then evolved past it. They developed philosophy, art, and science that made violence obsolete. We developed philosophy, art, and science to make violence more efficient. Baker nodded slowly. So while they were learning to stop fighting, we were learning to fight better. Exactly. And here's the really scary part for them. We're not even trying to be threatening, this is just how we are. We put weapons on everything, armor everything, and assume everything might be a threat because that's how we survived on Earth. A communication alert interrupted their discussion. It was from Earth, marked Priority 1. Baker accepted the transmission, and the face of Earth's president appeared on the screen. Captain Baker, I'm calling to inform you that the Coalition has agreed to all our terms. The former war zone is now officially recognized as human-administered space. Congratulations. Thank you, Madam President. What about the other matter? The Coalition has also agreed to our expansion plans. 50 systems, all unclaimed, are now open for human colonization. In exchange, we've agreed not to demonstrate our full military capabilities. After the President ended the call, Grant laughed. They still think we're holding back, aren't we? Baker asked with a slight smile. We haven't shown them our submarine doctrine yet. Submarine doctrine was humanity's approach to space warfare, treating it like ocean combat. Hide, strike, disappear. The aliens fought in open space with visible ships. Humans were already working on stealth vessels that could appear, destroy a target, and vanish before anyone knew what happened. Down in the station's common area, something unprecedented was happening. Human and alien merchants were trading. A being made of crystallized methane was negotiating with a human trader over the price of rare minerals. The human was teaching the alien about currency exchange rates, a concept that baffled species used to resource sharing. Zixa Theta, the former monitoring station commander, had become the station's alien liaison. His job was to help other species understand humans. It was, he often said, the most difficult job in the galaxy. Humans are insane, he would explain to newcomers. But it's a predictable insanity. They won't attack you unless threatened. The problem is they see everything as potentially threatening. A young alien, barely past its species' adolescence, asked him, "But why do they put weapons on their trade ships?" "Because to humans there's no such thing as a trade ship. There are only ships that happen to be trading at the moment. Every human vessel is a potential warship. Their cargo haulers have armor that could withstand our patrol boats' weapons. Their passenger liners have point defense systems. Their hospital ships carry enough nuclear weapons to sterilize a moon." The young alien's chromatic skin shifted to a color indicating fear. "How do we coexist with such beings?" "Simple," Zixa Theta replied. "Don't give them a reason to stop being polite." The transformation of the war zone continued at a pace that amazed everyone. Within 6 months, humanity had built 3 stations, established mining operations on 12 asteroids, and created trade routes that connected 40 different species. They didn't conquer or control. They simply existed, and their existence changed everything around them. The USS Havoc patrolled the outer edges of the territory. Its captain, Roger Stone, was known for his aggressive interpretation of defensive protocols. When pirates from outside Coalition space tried to raid the trade routes, Stone didn't just stop them. He followed them back to their base and destroyed it entirely. When asked why he had pursued them so far, Stone's answer became legendary. "They started it. We finished it." That's how humans do things. The Coalition learned to appreciate this approach when their own shipping lanes became safer than they had been in centuries. Humans didn't just protect their own space. They protected anyone who traded with them. And they protected with a thoroughness that bordered on excessive. Dr. Adams continued his research, interviewing dozens of species about their history and evolution. His conclusion was both simple and terrifying. Every species had a breaking point where they chose cooperation over conflict. Humans had never reached that point. They had simply gotten so good at conflict that they had to cooperate to avoid self-destruction. "We're not more evolved," Adams explained to a gathering of alien scientists. "We're less evolved. We're still the violent primates we were a million years ago. We've just gotten very good at hiding it behind technology and civilization." One alien scientist, a being of pure energy, asked, "Will humans ever evolve past violence?" Adams thought about it. "Maybe, in a few million years, but probably not. Violence worked too well for us. It got us to space, helped us survive first contact, and now it's making us rich through trade protection. From an evolutionary standpoint, why would we change?" Captain Baker watched all of this from his station. The war zone that had stood for 3 millennia was gone, replaced by something that no one had expected. Not a human empire or a military occupation, but a trade hub protected by beings who treated violence like a tool, no different from a hammer or screwdriver. The galaxy was learning to live with humans. They were learning that humans didn't want to conquer or destroy. They just wanted to go places and do things, and if anyone got in their way, they would remove the obstacle with whatever force was necessary. A year after first contact, the warning beacons around human space didn't say "keep out" or "danger." They simply said, "Human space, trade welcome, violence discouraged, strongly." And everyone in the galaxy understood that strongly discouraged in human terms meant, "We will end you if you try." It was the most effective peacekeeping message ever broadcast. Baker stood on his station, watching human and alien ships move through space that had once been a battlefield. The Defiance was docked below, being refitted with even more weapons, Because humans never stopped improving their ability to destroy things. We didn't mean to change the galaxy, he said to no one in particular. But they had. Simply by being human, by approaching space travel the same way they had approached everything else, with the assumption that they might need to fight their way through, they had created a new order. The galaxy had known peace through enlightenment. Now it knew peace through the universal understanding that humans were better at war than anyone else, and they would prefer not to prove it. Somewhere in the void, more human ships were coming. Colony ships, trade ships, exploration vessels, all of them armed, all of them ready. The galaxy watched and waited, not in fear exactly, but in the careful way one watches a sleeping dragon. Humanity had arrived, and the universe would never be the same.